Afternoon, welcome to another Forever Blue, all things Manchester City, each and every Tuesday right here on XS Manchester 106.1 FM, part of the Football Social, 5 days a week from 6 till 7 every weekday. And alongside me, Ian Cheeseman, is Paul Lake, the City legend that is Paul Lake, and we're smiling as usual because City back in business, winning as normal at Arsenal at the weekend.
We know, we've always said, Cheesy, that you go to certain grounds and it's going to be a tough game. You go to Arsenal where they've got a new manager, loads of expectation, loads of hype, exciting times for that Arsenal moving forwards, new players, and we turn up, don't really get out of second gear. And that sounds really arrogant, but I think we can safely say for the whole 90 plus minutes, you probably give overall our performance compared to what we've been like a 6 out of 10. And 6 out of 10 was good enough to beat Arsenal too, and to be fair, it should have been more.
Down the years, City's record at Arsenal's been poor. I've been to loads of games at the old Highbury. I don't know, have you ever been back to Highbury? Have you seen what's happened to it?
No.
I actually went into the old complex. I knew what they were doing. I'd seen pictures of it. I made a point on Sunday before the game of going. I had to get permission and everything. And they've actually got blocks of apartments or flats. So there's even there's a fitness centre as part of it. But anyway, there are different uses of these 4 stands because they've kept the framework of the stands but used it for housing complexes. And in the middle, they've kept a green, which is like a combination of a flat bit of grass and some reeds and a bit of a pond and whatnot. So, but the integrity of the shape of the stadium on the outside and the in still looks like Highbury. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, it's class there, isn't it?
Yeah. And I was thinking, I'm stood on the penalties, on the centre circle here, where Lakey once stood.
Yeah, where we got smacked 4-1. Arsenal in the yellow shirt. Yeah, let's forget that one quickly, Stevie, if I were you.
But the record, of course, at the Emirates now is so much better, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, the last time we were there, the 3-0, and that was probably, we talk about perfect football. The goals that we scored, and Leroy Sané, who we'll come and talk about in a minute, Leroy Sané was absolutely unplayable. He was electric, wasn't he, that night?
Well, I've obviously watched various different performances there and analysed it, and now we've watched 2 sort of competitive games, because people will manara about whether the Community Shield is a real game, but 2 competitive games, 2 comfortable victories, no goals conceded. Chelsea and Arsenal, 2 of the big 6, if you want to call them that. And I've walked away both times and found myself saying to my mate, was City really good? Were the opposition poor? Because we saw what Chelsea did on the opening day of the season at Huddersfield. We don't know about Arsenal because we haven't seen them play again since then. So what do you think? Was City very good? I mean, I get what you're saying about not getting out of second gear, but people were also saying, weren't they poor Arsenal? Weren't they poor Chelsea? But is it not City that makes those teams look poor, or were they poor?
I think you could probably level that at being a combination of the two, to be honest with you, Cheesy. I mean, it's certainly Arsenal at times were quite efficient with the ball. They did look a threat on the occasion and on their counter-attack. Certainly because, when we go forward in numbers, there are going to be gaps appear when you give the ball away. That goes without saying. But when all said and done, I felt John Stones was comfortable and Aymeric Laporte. So in terms of, I'd suggest that actually Arsenal were a level below where they should be at. In terms of Chelsea, obviously, Kante and Hazard were not on the pitch. It was Caballero was in goal. So you could probably argue that it wasn't their strongest side anyway, and certainly it was a different momentum that they brought into the Huddersfield Town game. So they're going to be stronger. Arsenal will get better. But again, we come back to City. There is so much more to come from this team. I mean, that was just a taster. It was almost like the graphic equaliser we always talk about. It was like literally 2 minutes of take it up, bring it down, take it up, bring it down, see the game off, and away we go. And that's what it felt like. But it was at a canter, wasn't it?
With music mogul Paul Lake tonight on the show. Obviously talking football, but a little bit of music in there as well. If you can imagine a graphic equaliser, that's a very good way of actually talking about it. One fan contacted me today and said, have you noticed, and it made me think, have you noticed a different approach from Pep's team this year? That instead of it being all centric on passing and keeping possession, that there was more of a mixture of long balls thrown into either this game or the Chelsea game. And I thought, well, that I've not really looked at it like that yet, so I'm going to ask an expert. Well, I've got you, Lakey, come on. Is it true?
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so that in terms of that's what Pep has added to his philosophy, if you will. I think that's always been the case where that's down to the individual in that moment to make that decision. And certainly I would agree that there has been occasions where there has been longer balls played, and certainly with Mendy on the pitch, he needs to settle into the side. I still think he's raw. I mean, he's wonderful, when he's at his best, and he's fresh, and he's exciting, and he's such a character. He's charismatic, and we kind of love him in the side. But he needs to get better, and I think he will do. I think his quality on the ball at times, and his decision making has been poor, and I think that's something that Pep will be mindful of. And sometimes when that efficiency in certain pockets of the pitch, how we'll look at those triangles being played and playing through the lines and getting into the pockets, and finding different ways to get to play around teams. When someone isn't showing that same kind of willingness to be in the right body position to be able to receive the football, sometimes they'll opt for passing it.
So you don't think that's Pep?
So I don't think that's Pep.
Right.
I just think that it's the individual decision makers that are doing that. But at the same time, it's a long pass. It's not a long ball getting rid of it. It is. But there has been one or two occasions where, you argue that we were under the cosh a little bit before the second goal against Arsenal. And they did have some pressure. You'd expect that. They're at home. It's a full house. It's a new manager, etc., etc. And clearing the lines once or twice, we did do that. And maybe a little bit more than we have seen in the past. But again, there's so many, this is multifactorial, the reasons why we approached the game how we did, and the fact that you've still got players coming back from the World Cup. You've still got players that are getting their touch and their timing back. I mean, let's be honest, Ederson has been immaculate last season, and that was probably his poorest game giving the ball away. He did look rusty, so it's getting that out of the system as well. And the euphoria of last season and the dizzy heights coming back from that and getting back to, right, it's business as usual now. And there's still that, the only human beings, when you've been on cloud nine for as long as we have, and 100 points and so many, breaking records left, right and centre, players going to the World Cup and doing very, very well, and coming back with as a World Cup winner as well. You've got all that to try and contend with in a human brain to try and then come back to business as usual. So there are players that are going to be a little bit off the mark, and Pep's going to give them that latitude. But a couple of games in, he'll be expecting what we know Pep will be expecting, which is nothing less than an 8 and 9 out of 10.
That question might have slightly been motivated by the fact that, for example, City playing Huddersfield next, and last season they came and defended very successfully and came away with a draw. People will forget that because it was on the day when the trophy was presented, but they achieved their goal and actually ran City quite close in the game over in Huddersfield as well. And I expect them to do the same sort of thing. And so there's also a train of thought that other teams now will start to think, this is how City play. They do this, they pass it around, and then they look for a gap. And this person who was contacting me was wondering whether Pepper thought, right, we need to vary things a little bit more. But we'll see.
But again, I mean, it's a very good point that he makes. Is that it was difficult, against Huddersfield Town. They did come with an agenda, and you felt that their final game, home game of the season against Arsenal of all people, all teams, was going to be one that would get out of jail. But actually, they were convincing against City and getting a draw, and also against Chelsea at Chelsea. And fair play to them. And they're very, very organised. But at the same time, I didn't expect Chelsea to go and beat them 3-0. And I believe that one or two of their players feel as though they need to be playing more. And I think David Wagner will say, hang on a minute, no, this is how we set out, this is our structure. And they are very, very organised. They're physical, they're going to get in your face. So we have to find a way. But this, as I said last season, and you heard me say it, Ian, when our players go out onto the pitch, it's like a quarterback. They've got so many options in their head. So when a ball's in a certain area of the pitch, they've got 3, 4, 5 options. There was a great picture on social media, and it showed a position where we've passed the ball into the attacking third, and there's literally almost like a hexagon of players.
Brilliant. I was going to bring that up, actually. Yeah. That's the opposite side of that argument, isn't it?
Exactly. So it shows you that, that willingness to be able to run the extra sort of 5-10 yards to be able to have that, be on for the ball, be available for the ball, always giving players options when they're on the ball. So that's what happens when you play in certain areas of the pitch, but at the same time, still keeping that width. And with the best intentions in the world, if you're chasing shadows for 60, 70 minutes, then it's mentally, it destroys you. And Huddersfield were clinging on for dear life against us. And there was a little the fact that the season was done and we were getting the trophy anyway. There's a little bit of that in that game, and you can be forgiven for that, can't you, mate? I mean,
of course you can.
How incredible were we all last season? So it's going to be interesting now because there's different dynamics, and as again, you know, we'll talk about this in terms of Leroy Sané.
Well, let's get on to Leroy Sané whenever you're ready.
Yeah, well, again, this is something which is fascinating to see our left-hand side. You know, it's been mentioned by lots of City fans and by one or two of the pundits. You know, Mendy's come back now. Mendy's very attack-minded, and he plays high up the pitch. You know, he's so quick, and you know, he's trying to get forward at every opportunity. Now, what space is he going into? The space that Leroy Sané occupied for all last season. Now,
Which means Sané's got to do something else, does it?
Well, it may be. Now, Leroy can switch. We know that. He's done that in the past, you know, and he's done it to great success.
And we saw Sterling and Mahrez switch.
Exactly. So that's something which, you know, is going to happen. But at the same time, when you're as a wide player, I mean, you heard Whitey talking about it last week, is that you don't want someone that's always going to run into your space. It's to go and support you and to give you that option. But Leroy seems to be a little bit, I'm going to say rusty again, but it seems to be a little bit out of sorts.
Do you think there's any hangover from the World Cup?
Well, maybe there's a little bit of disappointment, you know, that deep-rooted sadness that this was my chance. I'm in a rich vein of form. I've got Young Player of the Year in the Premier League. I'm desperate to go out and on the world stage and show what I can do for my country. And he wasn't even involved.
So he's a player who needs an arm round the shoulder.
So maybe at this moment in time, Pep is needing to give Leroy a bit more love. Now, he did it all last year. He did it himself. He was on 2 feet and he destroyed teams single-handedly at times. Do you remember the game against Newcastle? I mean, wow, that was breathtaking to see. And that's how exciting he can be. But at this moment in time, he may be feeling a little bit vulnerable, a little bit fragile. You've obviously got Mahrez coming in, and Mahrez is a top draw player, and he will raise the standards. And this will give more competition for Leroy, for Raheem Sterling, for Bernardo Silva. Bernardo straight away thought, you know what, I need to get back early and get into my stride straight away.
Well, he's the ground runner,
and boy, has he done that. You saw in the States what he was like.
Yeah.
And again, you know, at the weekend, he was probably our best player.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And he's a fantastic guy to have around, isn't he? You just see that personality about him. But coming back to Leroy Sané, you want him to feel that love again. You want him to be able to express himself like he did last season. We've got David Silva to come back and he will give that left side a bit more balance as well. You know, and at the same time then be able to look to try and get that combination play back going. I feel as though, as I say, we looked comfortable. I always felt that we had far too much for Arsenal, far too much. But we want our players to be back, to get that vein of form back that certain players show, especially in wide areas, the attacking players. But if there's anything that's off the pitch that can be dealt with, I'm sure that Pep Guardiola, with the talented man that he is, and the people person that he is, he'll recognise it and work on it. But again, it has to happen quite quickly because they'll be expecting every single game now to improve. And I'd suggest that by Christmas time, you know, Pep Guardiola is expecting to be, you know, maybe 2-3 teams in it, but already a proper gap starting to appear by putting teams to the sword. And that's when, you know, your top players really have to come good. Luckily, you've got 1 or 2 players that have raised it in those moments to be that player. Last season, often it was Kev De Bruyne. This season already, you know, Bernardo Silva showed that. Raheem, after all the abuse that Raheem Sterling has had, and Ian Wright was on a rant last night on BBC Radio 5 Live about it, talking about the element of racism with England fans towards Raheem Sterling and that bitterness towards him and not want him to succeed, even with an England shirt on, which is a sad indictment. But what does Raheem do? Dusts himself down, he comes back onto the pitch and he does that, you know, and that's a character. That's something that you want in your changing room, you know, so it shows you that there's players that are already saying to Pep, don't believe in me out, and that's where Leroy Sané has to get back to.
The interview he did after the game, actually, Raheem Sterling, was lovely to hear because he sounded so desperate to get back in the team and wanted to have his place. He didn't want to leave the door slightly open for anybody to go into. I was really impressed with that interview. Obviously, this week David Silva's announced his international retirement, which I can't help thinking most City fans who idolise David Silva, like I'm sure we do, will think, oh, that's not a bad thing. You won't be going away every international break and playing 2 games. He gets a little bit of a rest. Can there be any downsides to him hanging up his international boots? From a City's perspective, of course.
I don't think so. No, and obviously it's out of the travelling and the risk of injury. I mean, again, sometimes players can go away with their international side, and David was scoring goals for fun, and it may be that scoring goals for Spain got him into that goal scoring vein of form for City last season, and he scored, like Raheem, scored some key goals for us, important moments in games. And you want David to be as fresh and as happy and as comfortable. His child's now all sorted out, his family's in a good place, which is wonderful to hear for every City fan that wishes him so much love in that situation. And he'll come back and be one of the leaders on the pitch, that experienced head with Vincent Kompany, with Nick Otamendi. Kyle Walker's an experienced player now, so there's going to be, and obviously Sergio. So we're looking at players that are going to be leaders. And so David Silva's in a good place, he's settled. And, there's still that ego of, I'm still good enough to be in this team. And what we've got now, Cheesy, in my opinion, we've got lots of competition. Nick Otamendi scored some very important goals for last season and played very, very well, and could arguably have been our best defender last season. He's not starting. It's Laporte and John Stones. So they're knocking on the door. Vincent Kompany will not want to be sat on a bench for too long. So you've got...
Do we read anything to the fact it was Stones and Laporte at Arsenal?
Well, maybe not. But certainly I'm a firm believer that if you've got a left-sided centre-half, you need to have that balance. I think it's very difficult, and Richard Dunn is a case in point, what a legend Dunn he was for Manchester City. But how many times did he look so awkward and uncomfortable in playing left side, but nobody else would do that? And that rhythm, that way you receive the ball, you open your body up, or that can be key split-second moments where you're going to lose that in a game where someone closes you down, and all because your body position is not right, because you're on your wrong foot. And that's something that Laporte is lovely on the football. He's got great quality. He's got good strength. He reads the game very well, and he'll get better. But Nick Otamendi and Vinny Kompany are going to put pressure on them. But,
and I don't mean this in a horrible way, it's just a debating point. When Jolyon Lescott played on the left-hand side of City's central defence, he was left-sided, so he's exactly what Laporte was. I sometimes felt that Jolyon Lescott was, and my mate, who I talk to a lot about football, says this more eloquently, really, than me, but he says that some players who are one-footed are actually one-sided the whole way that they play. It's almost like that they look off balance when they're on the other side of the body. Now, I don't think Laporte looks like that. Clearly, players like Messi don't look like that, even though they're very one-footed. But I did think sometimes that Lescott did look a little bit like that. So it isn't just about being a left-footed, left-sided defender and right-footed, right-sided defender. It's about being balanced, isn't it?
It is, and it's about being comfortable and receiving the ball in those areas. And again, we talk about, this is what City work on. It's like when you talk about grassroots football, about simple preparation before a start of training really sort of takes to the next level is passing and receiving, and it seems like how many times do you say, City did like 800 passes in a game, but it was 7 passes that were just, it literally is a case of just changing the angle of your body position so that you can see that pass, you can make that pass. And like you say there about Laporte, he is very balanced, left foot and right foot, swivel hips. I think every City player has to have swivel hips.
He'd be a good dancer, wouldn't he?
They have to have that rotation ability, and no disrespect to Jolyon Lescott, who was a very good player for City, and obviously, a title winner and played some excellent games for us. But I think even with Laporte, he could be better than Jolyon over time, consistently better, and therein lies that balance that we've always talked about, especially when balls are in the channels in those areas. So when your good friend was talking about sometimes having that long ball option, that different option, that's what Laporte has got. If you've got a right-sided player in that moment, having to check back means the whole dynamic of the pitch changes, your angles change, your options change, and you end up being slightly negative and seen as negative, and Pep wants to get forward at every opportunity. And when you have that balance in those areas, it means that can be the first pass that you look for.
I can't help thinking that's one of the reasons why when he first came in, Pep saw strengths in collar off, because he used to love to switch the ball from one side to another, which Laporte can do. You're quite right to highlight that. Now, you're listening to Forever Blue. I'm Ian Cheeseman. This is Paul Lake, the City legend, next to me.